Hello and welcome to Let's Talk About It with Taylor Nolan. I am your host, Taylor, and today's episode is going to be a little bit different. This is the first time I'm doing this, so hopefully it's something that you guys like. I realize that, I am a guest on a lot of other podcasts and not everyone gets to hear that information. So I thought it'd be really cool to share with you guys an episode that I did with actually a guest that I had on a few episodes ago, Les of the Balanced Black Girl podcast, and just really enjoyed doing this episode with her and got a lot of really great feedback from you guys about what you took away from the episode that I recorded with her, and thought we could kind of continue the conversation. And I'm very, very personal in this episode, so hopefully it resonates with some of you, and if not, then you learn something new. And again, definitely want to encourage you guys, after you listen to this, Les is amazing and is such a good host and is having so many other great conversations, especially in the space of people of color, especially women of color, and just really appreciated the opportunity to chat with her. And I'm making her be friends with me now, so we're officially going to be best friends. But I hope you guys enjoy this episode, and at the end of it, definitely feel free to head over and subscribe to her podcast, Balanced Black Girl. And you can also follow her on Instagram at Balanced Les. So without further ado, enjoy the episode.
Welcome back to the Balanced Black Girl podcast. Today I'm joined by Taylor Nolan, mental health counselor and host of the Let's Talk About It podcast. Taylor and I connected through our mutual friend, Sarah, who's an amazing photographer who takes pretty much all of the photos on both of our Instagram feeds. Mm-hmm. And I am so happy to have her here on the show. We're actually interviewing in person, and I just did an interview for her podcast, and it's really fun. We're going to keep going.
Yeah. Doing a little back to back.
Exactly. So Taylor, you've been a very public figure, but for our listeners who may not know you, can you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit more about who you are and what you do?
Yeah. So my background is in clinical mental health counseling. I have a bachelor's and a master's, and then shortly after I got my master's, I did something a little out there and decided to go on a very different path, and ended up on The Bachelor. And then after that, ended up on Bachelor in Paradise. And then started a podcast, Let's Talk About It, where I decided to kind of still be a little bit in the field of mental health and also just be able to use the platform that I have now to be able to reach more than, just the one-to-one kind of private practice client work. So I'm licensed here in Washington and currently working towards hours for full licensure. And I do a lot of stuff on Instagram, trying to just, show that authenticity and encourage people to feel all the feelings and just encourage the conversation around mental health, and to just try to help people feel more comfortable talking about our feelings, even though it can be super uncomfortable. So it's kind of a mix of just doing stuff on the podcast and doing stuff on Instagram, and then working towards hours. And that's kind of me in a nutshell, I guess, a little bit just in terms of what I do. Mm-hmm. That's kind of what I do these days.
Yeah, that's like a good Cliff Notes version of kind of what you do. So let's talk a little bit more, just getting to know you better, outside of what you do. I love learning about my guests' wellness kind of journeys or wellness habits. I would love to hear a little bit more just about what wellness means to you. What do you do to make yourself kind of feel well? What does that look like?
Yeah, most of my wellness is not in the physical sense. It should be more, and I'm working on that. But most of my wellness comes from, being involved in my own personal therapy, being surrounded by good support. Support is so huge for my mental well-being and for almost everyone's. As humans, we are such social beings, and for almost any kind of disorder you may be diagnosed with, part of treatment is having support. So for me, wellness is being surrounded by really great people, making sure that I'm doing at least one thing a day that's just for me. That's not because I have to, that's for someone else. Just doing one thing that's for me, that's going to ground me and help me feel good. Oftentimes that's allowing myself 15 minutes to just sit on the couch with my cat. That's very much wellness, is being surrounded by animals for me when I feel like I'm in a good place and I feel connected. And I think doing the one thing that's for you a day, family, friends, being involved in therapy, those are all kinds of things that help me feel well.
Yeah. And I think that's great because I think we get very focused on physical wellness and, you know, how you feel in your physical body or, you know, moving your body or whatever that looks like is a part of wellness, but it's not all of wellness because you can be super fit, but not take care of your mental health. And that's not good either.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, unfortunately, and I guess fortunately at the same time for me, everyone assumes I'm very fit and very in shape because genetically I have a certain body type. It's very hard for me to gain weight. Just kind of naturally, if I laugh, I look like I have abs, but then I can push my stomach out and I look like I'm pregnant. And so fitness for me has never been something that's felt super pushed on me or felt super like, you know, I need to really get in shape because I'm gaining weight or, you know, certainly I have felt very weak most of my life. And so that has been probably the most motivating reason for me to start being more active. And, you know, the whole gym life thing is really not for me. Like I have only as of like last year have I ever really been in a gym. And my first experiences in gyms, I did not really like. Not only did it not feel like the right culture for me, but I just didn't feel like I had the same purpose in being there as everyone else that was there. I also had no clue what I was doing. Am I allowed to swear on here?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, yeah. I had no idea what the fuck I was doing. And it just felt so uncomfortable for me. So a lot of where I like to do my fitness is in games or in playing. And I think play is so important to our overall wellness. Something Brene Brown talks a lot about too, about the importance of creativity and play. So, you know, like if it's, unfortunately, a lot of this is like weather dependent for me. So like I'll go play tennis, I'll go play volleyball, I'll go for a hike. I love rollerblading. Like I rollerblade Green Lake all the time. So in that sense, I like to be fit and work out and play. But I've never been the person to go to the gym and be fit. I love to dance and sing. And so I'll go out and do that. I don't drink, but I'm like, yeah, let's go out. I want to go dance. So that's like kind of where fitness has came in for me.
Yeah. But I think that you touched on a lot of things there that I think people could really relate to. In a couple of different levels, even if maybe they're not in the same physical space as you. How you mentioned you have a hard time gaining weight. For some people that can be relatable. For some people they maybe have the opposite problem. But that feeling of fitness only being pushed on people who maybe
look like they
have a bigger body, whatever that means, you know, because that's a societal standard that, you know, has its own set of issues, that fitness is not only something that should be pushed on those people or should be used as a way to avoid that, but also that feeling of walking into a gym, which is not the best or most welcoming environment for literally anyone, and being like, what do I do here? What am I doing here? I think everyone has probably felt that way at some point.
Literally, like recently with someone I'm dating, I have gone into the gym with him in his apartment building, and I legit had to do like a pep talk beforehand and was like, okay, don't make fun of me. I was like, don't laugh at me. I was like, I'm going to go in here with you and I have no idea what the fuck I'm doing. So don't laugh at me because I'm going to try. I'm going to try to figure out exercises to do and look like I know what I'm doing. But really, I have no clue. So it's like, don't laugh at me.
If you're there and if you're trying, you got it.
Yeah.
And I think too, as someone who has spent probably too much time in gyms, not only on my own fitness, but working in gyms and training. Also, I think sometimes too, we worry more that people are looking at what we're doing more than they think. Because I know even as a former gym rat who I used to be like fit, buff girl, work out all the time, I literally would have tunnel vision. Like I didn't even see if someone next to me didn't know what they were doing or was doing the wrong thing. I literally had no idea because I was so
there was actually a girl in the gym this time that I'm talking about who was just jamming out so hard in her headphones and was like dancing in the mirror and like I mean, good for her. She was doing some like weird moves. I was like, whoa, but she just had like no care at all for anyone else around her. And like, after I saw her, I was like, okay, yeah, like I can just do whatever I want.
Yeah. Like it's your time.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, that felt good. There is a dance class that I like to go to here in Seattle, and it's in like a dark studio, and it's just like, it's women of all ages, all sizes, hairy armpits. Like I feel so comfortable in there.
Yeah.
And it's a good mix of like, you're dancing, but you're also getting a good workout in, but it's not like intense. And for me, I've never been into like the intense workout type stuff, but you know, definitely want to not feel like a super weak child. And I think mentally, you know, I definitely feel a lot more confident when I feel like I'm strong, even just in the sense of like, you know, I'm going to carry my laundry basket up the steps and not have my neighbor have to help me because I'm a strong, independent woman, you know, like, but then other times I'm like, no, I do want the help. Please carry this for me.
Exactly. Asking for help doesn't mean you can't do it yourself.
Exactly. I just choose not to. I choose not to be able to open this jar right now. Please help me.
I get that. I get that for sure.
Yeah. All right. So I want to switch gears just a little bit to share with you guys about one of my favorite sponsors of the podcast. I'm not sure if you guys recall me sharing about this company, but they are one of my favorites. You guys know I travel all the time. It can be a bit exhausting and a bit difficult because I am a major overpacker. So I've been using Away, which is first class luggage at a coach price. It was actually founded by two friends from New York who found themselves at JFK, which like, what a hassle, with dead phones, delayed flights, and thought of a brilliant idea to have luggage with power. And then Away was born. And one of my favorite parts about using the Away suitcases is that the interior features a patent pending compression system, which is very helpful for overpackers like myself. It's a very durable, clean material that's used. And not to mention, you guys get a 100-day trial. You can live with it, travel with it, Instagram it, and if at any point you decide it's not for you, you can return it for a full refund. No questions asked. And free shipping on any Away order within the lower 48 states. I mean, if you don't have one of these already, I don't know what you're even traveling with. I love it because it charges my phone, so it's always one of the most stressful parts about traveling is making sure, you know, I can get my boarding pass loaded on my phone and making sure I can text people when I've landed. And using the Away carry-on actually allows me to make sure that my phone stays charged because not all these planes have outlets these days, which, you know, I wish we could get with the times here. But you guys can take advantage of this special offer. You can get $20 off of a suitcase if you visit awaytravel.com/Taylor and use promo code Taylor during checkout. Again, that's $20 off a suitcase, which, again, you get a 100-day trial with, like, amazing. And all you have to do is visit awaytravel.com/Taylor and use promo code Taylor during checkout. So now we can kind of get back on track here and get back to the show.
So something that I would really love to talk to you about, you actually mentioned this on your Instagram recently, and it's kind of along the same lines of just kind of our bodies and how we show up and how we live in our bodies. Is you had someone reach out to you basically saying that because you posted a picture of yourself in a swimsuit, like, are you worried that people will see this? Are you worried that this is unprofessional? And I really liked your response to it because basically you said, like, I'm just showing up as myself.
Yeah.
I would want people who want to work with me to know who I am. And I also think that there's a really important element in there too of policing women's bodies. Of someone in a picture wearing a swimsuit, that shouldn't be a scandalous thing.
Yes.
Can we talk more about that?
Absolutely. Yeah. So I think like there's so many points on this. Like one, I'm not, so when people are questioning that, and this happens literally every time I post a photo in a bathing suit, which is not frequently. Yeah. It's really
you live in
not,
Seattle.
Yeah, it's not frequent. Even if I'm like in LA, for example, maybe one time in that visit, I'll post a photo in a bathing suit. And it's interesting because half of the comments are praising my ass. literally my actual ass. And the other half of the comments are shaming and judging me for being a therapist and having a photo with my ass in it, and that's unprofessional and clients shouldn't have to see this and all of that. And I think, I'm not I'm not going into an office and showing my client my Instagram and saying, hey, what do you think of my ass? Like, it's kind of absurd to think that just because I have a public profile that I'm then shoving this information at clients when it is completely their right to seek out that information if they choose to. I'm not interacting with clients via social media. And I make that very clear. I think there's definitely a different kind of judgment that gets placed on women of color when they show their bodies. And I think, being that I have this platform and I have this following predominantly from The Bachelor, which is very much watched by white women. Most of my followers are white women. That it's interesting. I'll watch a different girl, a good friend of mine from the show who's white and blonde, and she'll post a photo of her in a bathing suit just straight from the back. And every comment is just praising her. Not a single comment about, oh, well, this is inappropriate because you're a nurse and, that's not okay. Or nothing shaming whatsoever. And it's really interesting to me to see that every time I do it, even if it's like my stomach, even, it's, again, half of it is praising of, oh, I want your abs, blah, blah, blah. Which even no, embrace your body. Thank you for appreciating mine. But also you can still post photos like that if your stomach doesn't look like mine. And then the other half is you shouldn't be showing your body like that. You're a professional. What if your clients saw this? And, if my clients saw it, then guess what? They've learned that I have a body just like they do. Yeah. And surprise, I'm also human.
It's not that big of a deal.
It's really not. Certainly, I think, a client can have an issue with knowing too much about their therapist and, seeking out all kinds of personal information could definitely be damaging and bring some transference into the session, which can be worked through. Absolutely. If a client were to come to me and say, oh, I saw that you posted this on Instagram, blah, 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 I would talk about what that meant for them. And again, it's focusing the conversation on them. It's not like I'm going into a therapy session and I'm like, so my Instagram's @Tamocha. If you want to follow me and you want to see what I'm doing, it's really absurd. And I'm like, I don't know what else to say about this, but it's just, I'm in a bathing suit. And even if I wasn't in a bathing suit and I wanted to do something a little bit more scandalous and do a half naked shot or whatever and be creative and do a sexy photo shoot, I'm allowed to do that. I'm not, as professional women, we're more than just professional women. Being a professional is just one part of who you are. And I think it's really important that we allow ourselves the space to explore these other parts of ourselves, even if they're contradicting of each other, even if they seem a little bit more scandalous or not necessarily acceptable from society. I think it's good that we step outside of that box and allow ourselves to be the complex, unique individuals that we are, instead of trying to fit into a box of something that our career is supposed to define us as.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think for women specifically, we have so many experiences where people expect us to do just one thing. A professional woman only looks one way. A mother only acts one way. And we're full dynamic people who have all of these different areas of life and all these things that, make us who we are.
Yeah. And it was really interesting to me to see how many teachers reached out about that story, because so many teachers felt the same way about trying to, feeling so self-conscious about when they would go out with their friends, if that was okay for them to post on their social media, even if it was private, even if their page is private, they're self-conscious about just living their life and that being judged against their professionalism. And, I'm trying to think of where someone would argue against that being okay. And certainly there are some things that ethically just aren't okay.
Yeah.
Like, obviously, if you're like showing your elementary students photos of you drinking like at lunch break, like, yeah, obviously no, but like for a parent to see that and to judge the teacher or something, like it's, I think, really damaging because it only perpetuates a lot of like depression and, us wearing these masks, like the more that we judge each other and based on these professions and putting ourselves in these boxes, you're essentially telling people in the helping professions that they're not allowed to be who they are.
Yeah.
And that just leads to all kinds of other problems.
Yeah.
If I don't even know what else to compare it to. And I'm so bad at coming up with like analogies off the cuff. They never work out. So I don't even know what to compare it to. But like I think it's important to just have a basic understanding and allowing anyone that you meet to explore parts of themselves that you may not think might be them.
Yeah.
Because then, especially if you want them to show up how they're supposed to show up in their career, then you'll let them live their fucking lives.
Yeah. But people are dynamic and shouldn't just fit in one box or one role.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's absurd to think that like that's the kind of pressure that we should not only put on ourselves, but that we should allow other people to put on us.
Mm-hmm.
Fuck
That's
that.
true. And it's so prevalent.
So you guys know it is that time for a break in our show. And I have to say, this sponsor I'm incredibly proud to partner with. If you guys have not heard of them, March of Dimes leads the fight for the health of all moms and babies. And they support research, they lead programs and provide education and advocacy so that every baby can have the best possible start. And in January and February, March of Dimes observes Birth Defects Prevention Month. This is an annual event in which March of Dimes partners with the U.S. Center for Disease Control and Prevention, the CDC, to generate awareness among women of childbearing age, families, and healthcare providers about actions that they can take to help prevent birth defects. Now, birth defects are actually more common than most people think. They affect about 1 in every 33 babies born in the U.S. each year. That's about 120,000 babies, and are a major cause of infant death and lifelong disability. So I really, really encourage you guys this month and going on in the future here to get more information about what March of Dimes is doing in this area. You guys can visit marchofdimes.org/let's talk about it. Again, for more information on the work that March of Dimes is doing in this field, go to marchofdimes.com/let's talk about it. And now we can get back to the show.
And I think we live in a time where we're all super connected, where everyone has social media, everyone has kind of these external facing profiles. So even for someone who maybe hasn't had an experience like you've had, like being on a TV show that's super public, anyone who has a public social media profile can kind of essentially be a public figure and kind of be open to receiving like negative comments or feedback on what people should be doing or how they should behave.
Yeah.
If there's someone struggling with that, do you have any advice for them?
Yeah. First, I would say, like, you're going to get all kinds of feedback. Even when you get the positive feedback, like I think a lot of people say, like just shut out the negative. I don't think you necessarily need to take in the positive either. Like when you are secure with who you are and you're confident with the decisions that you make and you're showing up authentically, it doesn't matter what anyone else is saying. At the end of the day, that all becomes white noise. So people are saying positive things, people are saying negative things, people are just saying things.
Yeah.
But you're like, yeah, I'm okay with that because that's me and I feel confident with that. And, you're secure with it.
Yeah.
I would also say to someone that, is struggling with maybe seeing comments about themselves or having that kind of publicness, I think it's important to ask yourself why you'd want that. Like, because we have a choice, to some degree, about our pages being public or not. And really making a note to say why you want that, and understanding what you're opening yourself up to. Yeah. I mean, it's kind of ridiculous. One of the comments I get the most anytime I kind of disagree with a comment or call something out is, well, you signed up for this. And just because someone goes on a TV show or has a public profile, yes, they may understand that their life will change or that they may get comments, but that doesn't take away the fact that some of it's allowed to be painful.
Yeah.
And I think it's something that I've gone back and forth struggling with, and I don't know if I'm fully answering your question here or not. But one thing that I think I've struggled with on social media with receiving all kinds of different comments is honestly, at times, feeling confident enough to call something out.
Yeah.
And I think that's something I would really encourage someone, you know, in a public space who is receiving comments when things are just flat out false. Call that out.
Yeah.
You know, I think there's a lot of times that I get comments or I get DMs and it'll impact me, you know, and again, I try to do the same thing that I'm saying for other people, you know, don't take in the good, don't necessarily take in the bad. But it does have that initial gut reaction of like, that was mean.
Yeah.
That hurt.
Yeah.
And then kind of walking myself through that process of like, why that hurt? Where is that person coming from? How can I respond to this? Do I choose to respond to this? And I think when you let comments like that just kind of sit there and don't say anything about it, you're basically saying it's okay.
Yeah.
And I think it's one thing I have to remind myself is this is your platform.
Yeah. It's
like,
your space.
Yeah. Like this is your place for your voice. Like this isn't, you know, you're on someone else's page and whatever, like going out of your way. Like this is your shit. Like you have every right to stand up for yourself and to speak the truth and speak your truth. And so I would very much encourage anyone that received any kind of like negative backlash, especially, to call that shit out.
Yeah. Well, and that brings up a really interesting point. So recently I follow Rachel Cargill on Instagram. She's someone who is like a social activist and she talks a lot about like the Black female experience. And she has a lot of people who follow her to try to learn about that experience. And recently she had someone basically comment and say that they didn't like the language she used, or they didn't like that she sounded so negative. And she responded back to this person basically saying like, this is my page. I'll kind of do what I want. Like you know, whatever. And the conversation escalated and basically the girl called her a bitch in the comments.
That's helpful.
Yeah. And so she posted it and was like, this person said this about me. Like, I won't tolerate people disrespecting me like this in my space. And it turned into like this whole thing that sparked this big debate on her profile of people saying, well, you shouldn't be posting that she left this comment because now your followers are going to bully her.
That's literally what just happened to me. This happens all the time.
So now this woman is saying, well, now your people are attacking me because you posted this comment I left. But it's also like, well, you left a comment in a public forum. So don't, you know, it goes both ways.
Yeah, this is literally what I just dealt with.
Yeah.
And I actually did a poll once because sometimes I'll post a direct message, which is private, and we'll respond to it. And sometimes I leave the whole thing open. Sometimes I blur it out.
Yeah.
So I asked people, I said, would you prefer to remain anonymous if I post a DM? And most people said no. And then I said something about like, if you were disclosing personal information. And then they were like, yes. And so a lot of people did write in and say, you know, if they are saying something negative, you should absolutely leave it open. And if someone's just saying something like nice or whatever, like, give them that privacy. And that thought process to me was so interesting because it was basically like you wanted the people saying negative things to have that accountability and you wanted the opportunity to call them out, which I thought was interesting. And so when I post a private DM now, I blur everything out. I might leave like the picture open just because it's so
can't
small
really see
and
it.
whatever. Sometimes I'll put an emoji over it. But the public comment thing, that's literally what just happened to me with this photo of my ass in it. And, you know, this girl had asked a question, which I've at first thought, you know, maybe this is like a legitimate question. And then in the comments, she just kind of was very defensive and attacking other people. And I was like, this is ridiculous. So basically I publicly shared her comment on my story to then do a series of stories answering the question. And it was only one person. And this is again where like sometimes the negative voices are the ones that speak the loudest. But it's important to remember it's just one person who got so upset at me for posting her comment publicly. And I said, this was a public comment. And then they were both upset at me that I sent stans after her. And I'm like, I don't even know what that is. This is some kind of like weird social media language that I was like, I don't know what that is. I said, my response to you was very respectful, very informative, very vulnerable. Like I shared personal things. Like I was very respectful to even answer your question in the first place. Sorry. And you know, I in no way encouraged people to attack you. I didn't speak directly to you really, even specifically. I shared it because it was a question that I get a lot of the time. And it was just so interesting to me that she was so upset by that. And to me, it's like, well, if you're posting something publicly, be prepared to take accountability for it and to stand by it. And when I checked her page after, she had changed her photo. She had taken out some stuff in her bio. So yeah, I mean, I guess some trolls did go after her. And that's honestly like a really fucked up part about the internet. It's like, there's trolls everywhere. And, you know, they'll troll you for stupid things. They'll troll you for positive things. Like they'll find anything to troll you about. And unfortunately, that woman had started to semi-troll me and got trolled in return. It's a weird thing, but yeah, if you're going to post something publicly, be prepared to stand by that. And I said, I posted your public comment to my public story to very respectfully and nicely answer your question. And I stand by that. So,
well, and I think people on the internet think that they can kind of hide behind
100%.
being on the internet. Like people would never say these things in person that they leave in some comments sections. And I think that's why being held accountable for it can be that much more startling. Because I thought, oh, well, I'm behind the screen. I thought I could just say whatever I wanted. But they are real words.
Absolutely. And then it's interesting because then they are being met with comments from many other people. And it's like, well, you were just one comment to me from a lot of other people. And so it's almost like I think you get to kind of empathize with the person that maybe you were initially doing that towards. But yeah, it's a very like strange thing of how people can behave on social media. It's much different for me now than it ever was. But you know, has provided the opportunity for a lot of things. So I try to take it all with just like a grain of salt.
Pros and cons.
Yes.
Pros and cons.
Absolutely. Okay, so it's time to take just a little bit of a break here. I want to share with listeners about bras. Let's talk about boobs for a second. Not all boobs are going to be the same size. And one thing that I really struggle with is actually finding a bra that will actually fit my boobs. So one of the reasons I have been loving using Third Love is that they offer more than 70 sizes in bras, including their signature half cup sizes. I mean, that's amazing. Not all brands offer half cup sizes. And so there really is going to be a bra that will fit everyone. And not to mention, it is incredibly comfortable. Like the straps don't actually slip. There's a tagless label, so there's no itching. It's really lightweight. There's actually super thin memory foam cups that mold to your shape, and they're like signature to Third Love. And the newest member to the Third Love family is their line of incredibly soft, smooth, and breathable cotton bras. Like, how freaking cozy and comfortable does that sound? But Third Love knows there's a perfect bra for everyone. So right now they are offering my listeners 15% off your first order. So you guys go to thirdlove.com/Taylor now to find your perfect fitting bra and get 15% off your first purchase. Again, that's thirdlove.com/Taylor for 15% off today to get a bra that fits you just right. But now we can get back to the show. No more booby talk for the day.
So something that I admire is that you are very open and honest about ways that your experience on The Bachelor was traumatic for you.
Yeah.
After having that experience, what did you do to work through that trauma to get to a place of healing for yourself?
Yeah. Well, it was very difficult. Like it wasn't, and what's interesting about it is that it's not just like trauma happened and now it's time for recovery trauma. Like the trauma literally reoccurs 3 different times a year. Well, more so 2 times a year. But you know, and part of the trauma is related to my job now. Like it's something that still is prevalent in my life currently now as a new season is airing. And it took a very long time for me to even come to the terms with the fact that it was trauma. And especially the fact that not only was the first time trauma, but the second time was also trauma. And that's not something even that I've spoken publicly about because there's things behind it where people wouldn't understand maybe how it be. People would probably understand if I actually explained it, but it's just really personal. So yeah, it's, you know, during it all as it was happening, I didn't do a great job of taking care of myself. It's very hard to explain the whole environment of the show and what that experience is like. But I was very isolated. I definitely was very depressed and had so much anxiety. I really wouldn't really leave my bed a lot. Like the anxiety from social media was so big. You know, I had my therapist already before I went into the show. And so then after that, you know, I mean, that would sometimes be like the only time I would leave the house that week would be to go to therapy. And that was sometimes like 2 times a week, sometimes 3, because, you know, that show airs on Monday and then you have no idea what's about to be shown. You have the anxiety going into Sunday night. Then, you know, you have everything happening from Pacific time, 5 p.m. Until like 1 a.m. And then you have Tuesday, the news outlets covering it, all of that. So then you're just bombarded with constant feedback about every little thing that you did, which is not even the full picture of anything. And you're trying to process what your experience was and how that aligns with what you're now watching. There's, you know, just so much feedback. And I think I didn't do the best job of shutting out some of that feedback and trusting myself. I allowed my view of things and what my truth was to get very blurred by the masses of the negative. But I would say a large part of recovery in that trauma has definitely been identifying it as trauma. I remember that therapy session very clearly where she was like, you know, Taylor, like this is trauma. And I was like, I know as a professional, like I should know this, but it's not anything I've ever experienced. And my life has completely changed because it's not only just it's like your whole identity changes. You get a whole new identity. And you don't necessarily know that before you go on the show because you could get 30 seconds of airtime in a whole episode or you could literally be in the midst of the main drama of the show and you have no clue. So there's a lot of layers. I definitely had a lot of support just like from my family. I know that they knew it was really hard and it was really hard on them too. And then, you know, a lot of my time on the show also had to do with my career. So there was a lot of like trauma around my identity as a professional, which is really shitty. And like I've had to empathize with Taylor at that time a lot. But yeah, mostly honestly, like therapy very much helps in recovery and allowing when opportunities come up to heal, allowing it to happen. And when I say to heal, that doesn't just mean like, I'm fine. Like that process to heal means acknowledging the pain and empathizing and working through that and talking about it to someone. So yeah, that happens, you know, every new season where I deal with that.
Well, thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
And for someone who maybe not, that's a very specific situation. So I wouldn't say he's in a similar situation.
Yeah.
'Cause that's like very specific, but maybe someone who is finally getting to the point where they've experienced a trauma and they are recognizing it and they want to figure out how to take those steps towards recovering and healing. And they wanted to seek out a therapist. What are some qualities that people should look for in a therapist when they're embarking on that?
Yeah. Well, first, I would highly recommend using psychologytoday.com to find a therapist. That's something that I've always used no matter what city I'm in. I've often put that out as a recommendation. It's not an ad. I'm not sponsored by them. They don't pay me to
But if
say
they want to
it.
sponsor us,
But they could.
I mean, y'all can.
Yeah, that'd be nice. But yeah, they're super helpful. Like you can filter for, your insurance, for your zip code, if you want a male or if you want a female, what kinds of issues you want to be addressing in therapy. So highly recommend that website, psychologytoday.com. And then honestly, I think it's really important when people start the therapy session to look at it as like, this is not going to be a one-stop shop.
Yeah.
I don't even know if that's the right phrase to use for this. But it's not going to be like a one-time date.
Yeah.
It's not like you might go to one person and that might not work out. That does not mean that your journey with therapy is over.
Yeah.
That does not mean to give up on seeking help.
Yeah. Date around.
Yes, exactly. Like the first friend that you sit with at the lunch table might not be your best friend. That's a better one. There we go.
That was a good analogy.
There we go. Proud of myself. Got one in. But yeah, I mean, I think like finding a therapist that on some level you feel like will understand you, and part of that depends on how they communicate to you, and giving that a chance. Like there will definitely be some people that go in and have a first session and immediately they know when they start interacting with this therapist that this is not for me. Like I don't vibe with you, and that's totally okay. A therapist's feelings are not going to be hurt. Yeah. And I think that's one thing, like people will often stay with one therapist because they feel like they might hurt that person's feelings. And, it's a nice therapist, but like, I don't really think that they get me. I'm not really being challenged, but like, they're nice, and feel bad about hurting their feelings. Their feelings are not going to be hurt. You can always, the thing that's important to remember about the therapeutic relationship is that, it's okay. Like the focus is you. Yeah. Like you can speak up. You can say, I really would like to be more challenged. Yeah. You can say like, I need this to go really slow. And I would 100% say like, if you're with a therapist that you feel like isn't challenging you or you feel like you're not getting anything out of it, like express that to him or her. Like, or they like share that with your therapist because they're not going to know how to best help you unless you communicate that. And you have to communicate what's not working and what is working. It's just like any other relationship. Yeah. But it's a super special relationship because you actually get to process some of those things that you wouldn't in an everyday relationship. Yeah. And there might be something really specific to why you're not liking that therapist anymore. And like, what is that about?
And listen to that.
Yeah. Like, express that to your therapist, be like, I'm having trouble with this because I don't feel like you challenge me enough. And like, I would really like to discuss our relationship. So yeah, I would just say like, go in with an open mind. And there's different therapeutic approaches. Like read through what that person's approach is in their disclosure statement as you start the process and see, if their approach works for you. If they are psychoanalytic and they're going to want to dig through your childhood and, you're like, that's not up my alley. Like, I'm not ready to go there yet. Maybe find someone that's more like humanistic, person-centered. If you're like, I really want to dig deep in my issues, like, maybe someone that's more Freudian might be helpful to dig into those childhood issues. But yeah, I think just doing your research and being open to it and knowing that it's not like progress is not a linear line. Yeah. And you got to be compassionate with yourself through that process.
Totally. I love that you said that progress isn't linear because I think that can apply to so many things. I know I used to tell that to my fitness clients all the time of like, some days you're going to go to the gym and you're going to crush it. And then a week later you might be PMSing and it might feel like you can't do anything that you just did. And it's not linear and that's okay. And especially with our minds. I mean, nothing is linear with our minds.
Yes. I mean, you could be going on life totally fine and then something will come up to trigger you and that's okay. It's an opportunity to work. It's an opportunity to heal. And that's where the magic happens.
It is. But I think too, it's also important that we talk about the fact that it is work. Like it is hard and messy and challenging to do that work.
Yeah, it absolutely is. And that's why it is so important to have a therapist that you feel like you connect with, because otherwise it's going to be a really, really difficult journey. And it's already hard enough to do that kind of work. And even outside of the therapeutic relationship, it's important to have that support in general, for your friends and your family and the people in your community to understand that you're doing this really hard work right now. And like, depending on what's going on, like entering into that space and being committed to that kind of thing is not only going to change you, but therefore going to change your dynamics and your relationships with the people in your life.
Yeah.
So
totally.
That's why I think it's so important to just communicate about what you're experiencing. If you're experiencing a really hard time, you're not feeling the best, of like, just letting the people around you know that.
Yeah.
And then once you do start making those kinds of changes and you're starting to heal and everything, communicating that too. Because there's so many things that happen between our interactions with people where like, we're just going opposite ways. Like we're just talking through each other. Like we are not on the same page at all. And I think the more we communicate like where we're at and what we're experiencing in an authentic way with the people in our lives and being vulnerable like that, not only does it encourage other people to do the same, lets other people know they're not alone. It just increases our connections and like the world will be such a happier place.
It's true though, because if you have an experience that you then go through a kind of a healing journey, you can't necessarily take people with you because everyone has to be on their own journey, but understanding that the people in your life are a big part of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that they could be the ones triggering certain things come up throughout your healing process. And then them knowing that that's something that you're working on, like super, super helpful, super important.
Sure is. Sure is.
Yeah. Like it's the people close to me in my life understand how the show can be a trigger in some ways and how that can put me in not a good place.
Yeah.
And all I have to do really is say, I'm not in a good spot.
Yeah.
And they know why.
And that's like a stopping point.
Yeah. And they know why, and they're not going to take offense, if I cancel plans or if I just need to take some time to myself. Like, they get it. Because I've communicated it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And something kind of along the same lines where we talk about having people in our life that we can relate to and also visiting therapists that we could relate to. I would love to talk to you a little bit more about representation and what that looks like. So representation for people of color going to therapy, maybe your experiences as a woman of color who is a therapist, like in your schooling, were there other students of color, like in your classes who are also becoming therapists, and what has that looked like for you?
Yeah. So I would say in my bachelor's, that I got a bachelor's in psychology, and I would say that was like somewhat representative. It's obviously a lot more women.
Yeah.
In my master's though, it was in Baltimore and it was really small. Like my cohort was pretty small.
Yeah.
But there were, honestly, it was a good, diverse mix of people.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think. I can't even recall everyone's backgrounds because there were like such specific, like unique things.
Yeah.
I want to say there was
That's a good thing though, because then when you can be like, oh, there was one black girl there.
Yeah.
Like when it sticks out that much, that's when it's not good. So the fact that you can't really remember is actually, I think, a good thing.
Yeah, no, there were like several black girls. I remember there was like a older black woman who was actually, I want to say, like, she was like straight from Nigeria.
Wow.
And she had so many experiences from there that like she brought.
Yeah.
She was married to like a Hungarian man and like she was so wonderful. I love her. She was in my group counseling class and she's wonderful. I loved her. But yeah, I want to say there was maybe like a small handful of white men. One of them was my ex-boyfriend. And
we've all been there.
Yep. But yeah, I would say that my master's program was a pretty diverse group of people. I think that there's definitely less like, it's interesting because psychology is typically like historically a male dominated field.
Yeah.
But I think the more that the field is growing, it's becoming way more female populated.
Yeah.
Like most psychology programs are dominated by women these days. But then when you get into the higher education, you start to see that it's more dominated by men, white men.
Yeah.
And I think that it's definitely more difficult to find women of color represented as helpers. And they are more often represented as social workers or like nurses. I think that's the most where I've seen representation for women of color. And I think that that's good that they are represented in those spaces, but I think it's also good to note that they can expand outside of those as well. And I think I don't recall if you can, but I want to say that on Psychology Today, you can filter for like what kind of background you want your therapist to have. And I know for me, I did in high school, I did have a therapist who was a Black woman, and she was like very cool. She was a lot younger, like seemed, I'm going to say hip, and I sound old, and was just like so understanding, and like we had really good rapport. And that was in high school. So I was like, I don't think I went very frequently. But I just remember being like, she's really cool. And I actually feel like I have a good rapport with her. And I feel like she understands and is actually like trying to get to know me. I have never personally seen a male therapist, and I've always wanted to challenge myself in that way. But I do have a male supervisor. And most of my supervisors actually, even throughout school, have been white males. So that's an interesting piece there. But my therapist that I've had since I've lived in Seattle is a white blonde woman. And my mom's a white blonde woman. So I relate in that way. But it's been very important to me that she's been very open to understand what it means for me to be a woman of color and what my struggles have been in that. And I've seen where she's been able to learn and she's been able to grow in that area, as well as helping with reflecting back to me what I'm learning and how I'm growing. I'm sure it would be a very different experience if I were seeing a woman of color as a therapist. And I think it's definitely good for people to explore and to be open to that kind of thing, especially if you have grown up within the Black community and that's kind of like what you know, and that's like how you know how to relate to people, you know, that could be really helpful in your, you know, very vulnerable journey of doing therapy.
Absolutely.
But yeah, it's definitely not, you don't see women of color represented enough as being therapists, I think. And I hope that that's changing. And I try to be one of those women that's changing that, I think. So, yeah.
Heck yeah.
Yeah.
And one of the things that we did touch on a bit when we were talking for your podcast, but it was more so like you asking me, and now I would love to learn a little bit more about you, is just in your upbringing. So you shared that you are mixed, and you did mention just now, like your mom is a white woman with like blonde hair and what that is like. And so I'm curious for you, what your upbringing was like as a young girl, as a woman of color, growing up in an environment where it sounded like that there wasn't a lot of that.
Yeah.
What was that experience like?
Yeah. Well, so I started off like elementary school. I was here in Seattle and wasn't really ever aware of the fact that I was like Black. Like no one really said anything. Like my dad was not in my life, and I never really wondered about it. I was never like, where's my dad? Like, what's my dad like? Like, why don't I have a dad? Like, it just wasn't really me. Like, my mom and I were super close. There's a picture right there, if you can see. That's us on our flower IKEA couch with face masks on. And we were just like BFFs. She had me when she was 20. So she was still like very young. And we just had a really close relationship. And so I just didn't have a relationship with that side of my family. And she met my stepdad here in Seattle, who was a pilot in the Air Force. So we then moved to South Carolina for middle school. And that was like, oh shit, things are hitting the fan. I am Black. Like, I don't think at the time I like really processed, obviously, the impact that it was having and how I was feeling about myself. But especially in my grad program, I did a lot of reflection work around that time. My mom did not really have any people of color in her life as friends. They were all kind of just white women. My stepdad is a white man and really only has white man friends. And, you know, so in middle school, not only was I the new girl, but I was also like the mixed girl, and was bullied by white women, was girls at the time, was bullied by Black girls. Black guys would pick on me. White guys would make fun of me. It was a very weird time. Made fun of for my curly hair, like told I was too white, told I was too Black, was literally told to like go pick cotton in the field, was literally like called, you know, terrible names. One of the girls that I thought was like one of my closest friends at the time, who had been there to like help me deal with the fact that I was being called these names, had then one day actually turned around and called me one of them. So it literally, I was like, I'm running away and like wanted to just come back to Seattle and felt like it was a terrible place. Like I was told so many negative messages about being Black that like the part of me that's Black is ugly and negative, and the part of me that like I need to change. And even going into my grad program of really understanding, like I honestly, up until probably like 3 years ago, I would have never really considered myself a woman of color. Like,
interesting.
It was a very new thing for me to like even consider.
And what changed?
Well, I think partially going through my grad program and understanding like, you know, I am Black and I've had experiences of a Black person, you know, I've experienced the racism, and it's really unfortunate and like really sad for me that a lot of like the messages that I've received about the Black part of me are negative and ugly and things that I hated and things that like, even like my hair, I was like, oh, I hate my curls. Like they make it seem like I'm more Black. When my hair's straight, like people could think I'm just a white girl with dark hair. And even when I was younger, I would get like really, really dark. Like now I get dark in summer and stuff, but back then, especially in South Carolina, it's hot as balls there. So I would get like super, super dark. And it was like something as a little girl that I like hated and resented and was so ashamed of. And so as a young adult, as a young woman in my grad program, you know, just reflected on that a lot and was like, you know, why do I think these things are like ugly about myself? And honestly, having a lot of empathy for like middle school Taylor and trying to embrace those parts of myself. And so that is where I started to like wear my hair curly more and like honestly would put myself in situations where I'd be more out in the sun, where before I would literally like not want to stand in the sun because I was like, I don't like, no, like, cause then I'll get really dark. And then I'm like, what the fuck is wrong with me? Why am I even like, why is that a bad thing? Like I look at other Black women who are darker and I don't think that they're ugly. Like why would I avoid that for myself? And being able to like pinpoint where all of that came from was really helpful for me in the process to be like, these were these people's voices and like, how dare I let them like fuck up my identity like that and like absorb those messages from them. And the fucked up part about all of this is that, you know, years later when I'm in college and then especially when I'm on the show, these same people that told me to go pick fucking cotton in the field and call me all these names would then comment on my page and be like how beautiful I am and how they love my curly hair. And it's such a mind fuck. And it's like, is real messed up, but
it's super messed up.
And I think I started to, in grad school, I was surrounded by a super diverse cohort. And so, befriended other women of color for like the first time really in my life where it felt like a genuine friendship and it felt like, you know, I didn't make them feel uncomfortable. I felt like they weren't making me feel uncomfortable. And I still don't think I do enough of that. Like, I try to look at my friend group and try to, invite other people in and, whatever, try to, have a diverse friend group. It's hard to make friends as an adult. It's hard to make friends as a public figure. But I feel a lot more confident in myself now, being able to fully like own the fact that I'm a woman of color. Yeah. And what's really frustrating is when people try to fight me on that. And they're like, even actually one of my close girlfriends one time was like, you really consider yourself a woman of color? And I'm like,
yeah, because I am.
Yeah.
What? Yeah.
And it's like the fact that I wouldn't necessarily pass for a black girl means that I shouldn't identify as a woman of color. Yeah. And I'm like, well, I've experienced some things that I'm pretty sure only black people can relate to. So
yeah.
And I think also a big part of my development in that is being close with other people who are black and who consider themselves men and women of color. Yeah. But again, I would say that would not have even have been until recently. And it still isn't something necessarily in my family life. I do have some contact with not necessarily my dad, but like his sisters. And he has like 11 other children from different women. And so I've got reached out to by several of them. And I'd say there's really one that I've like focused on a relationship with and somewhat another one. But I've gained so much like more empathy and honestly like proudness, which I'm making a word, in being a person of color and being a black woman, because seeing the experiences that like my younger brother has had to go through and just how life is different for him. Like, it's so infuriating in so many ways. Yeah. And I want to do nothing but like to support that and to like help make it different. Yeah. So I don't know. I'm just going off here, but
no, it's good. I mean, this is like what I wanted to hear from you. Yeah. Yeah. What that experience has been like.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's been a very weird one. Yeah. But even, I mean, we talked about this a little bit on my episode, just in terms of dating, like I've dated mostly white guys with beards is like my thing. Yeah. And, I don't think, I'm trying to even think, I've gone on one technical date with a black guy. Yeah. And not that all black dudes are like him, but we didn't click. Yeah. And so that didn't happen again with him. And I'd be open to it with someone else if it felt like it worked. Yeah. But I think there's, I've tried to kind of unpack this about myself in terms of like who I'm attracted to, why I'm attracted to them, how come this is a pattern for me. And I think it's, I can definitely get in a space where I'm like beating myself up and I'm like, God, Taylor, like you should go out on dates with more black guys. And, why aren't you more attracted to some of the black guys that you see on Bumble or whatever, and
girl, where? Because I'm looking for black guys on Bumble in Seattle and I'm not seeing any. So
there's not that many. Yeah. And the ones I find, I'm like, hey, nope. But yeah, and then I got excited because I saw one and I was like, oh, like you seem like cool. And then legit basically told me on our date about how like his pictures were like photoshopped of like him traveling. And I was like, oh, I thought you like traveled.
Why would you admit that?
Yeah, it was really odd. But
poor thing.
Yeah. But I try to like have
dating for help.
He does. The whole date was really weird, honestly. But I try to like have compassion with myself and I that like, Taylor, like this makes sense. Like you grew up around all white people. Like all that's in your family is white people, and most of your friend group is white people. So it only makes sense that you'd be attracted to white guys.
Yeah, that's if that's all you know.
Yeah, and there's definitely like, obviously guys that I follow and stuff on Instagram and stuff that are like black men and like other men of like mixed race and stuff that I'm like, he's like really fucking hot. Like it's not that I don't find them attractive. I'm like, you're really hot. It just hasn't been something that's like panned out, but it is always interesting to me to see like how a white guy will relate to me when we date and like how he will raise children
Yeah.
and how he will understand my perspective and my experience of life.
Yeah. So are those questions that you ask, like if you start dating a new person or you date a white guy, you like really gauge like how comfortable is he with this? How empathetic? Like what does he understand? Yeah.
Yes. And not until recently. And even the one guy that I'm kind of dating right now, I mean, he's like Canadian.
Yeah.
And he actually has a very diverse friend group. And it's interesting because I think I asked this question early on, you know, and I have with other people besides him. And typically, like, they seem confused by me even asking. And I think that's partially because they're like, they don't consider
even get
me.
it.
Well, I think because they don't consider me a woman of color. I think it's because they're legit like, you're a white girl. Like, what? They're like, how do you mean? How does it change you being a woman of color? And I think the Canadian man, he has been like very understanding of that and has like really heard me out on why that's important to me. And at first I think like he kind of thought it was silly because it's like, Taylor, like, I just see you as you, like, and I see where that's a part of your life and I see where that's part of you, but like, there's so many other parts to you. And I'm like, yeah, I know. I'm like crazy bitch. Like there's a lot going on. There's a lot for you to take in right now.
It's a lot of layers.
Yes. That's actually what he says. He's like, there's a lot of layers here. And I'm like, you like them? But yeah, like to him, he's kind of like, yeah, like this is like one layer of you. And I understand it's an important layer for you. And even, you know, I ask him like, okay, like if we had children and they were like curly haired, like brown girls like me, like how would you go about that? You know? And I do think it's important to have those conversations, especially as like a interracial couple to be able to understand that this person, yes, unfortunately, because of their skin color, have a very different experience of life than you. And to really love that person and to grow a life with them, you gotta understand what that is. Like, you should be asking questions about what that's like. Like, if you're dating, a black man that grew up in fucking Connecticut, you better ask him some questions about what that's like to grow up in suburbs of Connecticut as a black dude. That's
probably pretty challenging.
Yeah, like you gotta ask these questions, even though they're uncomfortable. Like, I think it's important to start out with like expressing that you really want to know them and you really want to know what their life experience is. And, you know, I think we should have a conversation about like race, you know, because we come from different backgrounds. And just like we would talk about, you know, you growing up Christian and me growing up Catholic, like let's talk about you growing up black and me growing up white.
Yeah. And I think even more than that, kind of the next level to that is if you have children, really understanding there's a possibility that you could have kids who have an entirely different cultural identity than you. So one, what are you doing to help them navigate through that situation? Two, are you also putting influences in their life that they can relate to? And what does that look like? Are you prepared to do that? Those are really important conversations that I think I won't say they don't happen often enough because I think every family is different and I can't make those generalizations and I didn't have that experience, but I know quite a few people who are mixed who did have an experience similar to yours where they were always different, they were always other and they didn't have those influences in their life who were similar to them. And it's super, super important to understand that.
Yeah. And, you know, as I watch Naya grow up and as I watch her relate to people around her and, you know, who they're inviting into their family. Like, all those choices are so important. And as I've watched this, the last like 4-ish years develop, it's caused me to reflect a lot on like baby Taylor. And I think, you know, because she honestly is like a reflection of me in so many ways. And we're not even like blood related, but it's like really weird. Where I'm like, I think back to, you know, me and it does make me question things. And I haven't had this conversation yet with my mom, but it's one that I'm hoping to be able to have soon. I've talked about it with Rob a little bit where, you know, I question like, you know, did she ever talk to Jason, my stepdad, about how he felt about being a stepdad to a young Black girl. Like, how was he going to respond when I came home from school crying because I was experiencing racism and I was being bullied for being Black? Like, I don't know if that was ever a conversation, but like, he wasn't there for me in that way. I didn't have people to relate to that experience. I didn't have anyone to talk to about that. Like, I was completely alone in that experience and in feeling different and feeling ugly and feeling like ashamed of my Blackness. Like, I did not have any examples except for Rob of what it looked like to be Black and like to be happy being Black and to owning being Black and to that being like an awesome, strong, beautiful thing to be.
Which it totally is.
Yeah. And so now, like, especially, like I said, these last 3 years, as I watch like Naya like this, like it's been so interesting to just look back and be like, I wish I would have owned that part of myself, or like, this is an opportunity now for me to own this part of myself, and how will I show up in this? And, how much am I like censoring myself? How much am I whitewashing my own fucking personality? I mean, even being on The Bachelor, like, it was really hard because it's like, okay, make your hair straight. Like, you're appealing to white America here. You're on a show with mostly white girls where, most of the time the Black girls go home early, and it's almost a joke that they're even considered for the show. Like, let's be real here. Like, am I only going to make it somewhat farther because, I'm a Black girl, but I can pass for being a white girl? Like, what? Like, it's so bizarre. And where it's like, do I really feel like I can actually show up and be myself? Which part of it includes me being Black, and part of it includes me being white. And like trying to surround myself with people that will like encourage both of those sides and just like allow me to just be me at the end of the day. And it was interesting, like in grad school, as I went through all of this kind of reflection, there was like a cultural paper we had to write about like our culture. And legit, I was like, I don't have a culture. I was like, wow. I was like, what? Like, we watched Love Actually on Christmas Eve. Like, legit, I had no clue what to write about that. And basically, it ended up being a paper about like my struggles with being biracial and how, at the end of the day, my culture is like very unique. Like, my culture is like me. Like, the person that I've been able to develop, and yes, that has a part to do with my family, but like there's not like a strong culture there. Like, there's not a lot to it. So that was like really hard to like process. And I feel like in a way I've made a bit of a life that's a bit different from my family. And there's a bit of like a separation there, which is partly just because we're on different paths in life. I'm, 25 now, and we're maybe less close than we were before. But I think it's also me finding and getting in touch with this other part of myself that they don't really relate to, and they haven't really put themselves in a position to educate themselves on or to experience firsthand.
Yeah. And now that, you're an adult and have had all these experiences, you are kind of creating your own. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that. That is super interesting. And it is, it's just, I'm fascinated because we talked about this in our earlier conversation, just had such a different experience that I like hearing from other people and what their experiences look like and what their Blackness looks like to them and their relationship with that, and even how it changes over time. It's important to talk about.
Yeah. Very much getting more in touch with my Blackness, and I think more so just owning that and feeling confident in that and being able to say like, I am a woman of color. And not like, I'm a woman of color.
No question mark.
Like, and not even a question mark, but not even like not having a sense of like feeling ashamed for that, or that's like something that like you want me to be white. So like, I'm not a woman of color. Like, I'm just, my mom's white. Like, I'm white. It's really bizarre. Even this actually is like really, really funny. And like also really sad at the same time. The Canadian guy that I'm dating now, literally we had a moment, because this is along the questions that I ask him,
Yeah.
you know, and anyone I go on a date with, you know, I'm like, have you ever dated a Black girl? Mm-hmm. And obviously, like for me, with my experience, if someone has dated a Black girl, it's likely that it's a different experience than dating me, because I have not always fully identified as a Black girl and I'm biracial and whatever. But I always ask that.
Yeah.
And oftentimes you're like, yeah, I have. And I'm like, no. Have you dated a Black girl?
Like gotten to know, truly understand who that person is, their experience.
Yep. Most of the time it's they've had sex with a few Black girls. And I'm the first one. Yeah. I'm the first one that they're like actually dating. And so I kind of gave a Canadian man some shit because he had said that he had dated Black girls. And I was like, okay. And then we were getting ready to go out, and he was ready a bit earlier than I was, and was very kind. And I expressed appreciation for this, where he said, is there anything I can do to like help you get ready, like since I'm done? And I was like, oh, thank you. And I was like, I think like the only thing I've left to do, like, is brush my teeth and like put lotion on my legs and like put my shoes on.
Yeah.
And he was like, okay, do you have to like put lotion on your legs? And I was like, well, yeah, otherwise I'll get ashy. And he was like, ashy? And I was like, what? He's like, you'll get ashy? And I was like,
you didn't know what that meant.
Do you not know what ashy is? And he's like, what are you talking about? And I was like, boy, you have not dated a fucking Black girl. I was like, don't tell me you dated a Black girl, but you don't even know what ashy is. And I gave him so much shit for it, but he ended up rubbing coconut oil on my legs while I brushed my teeth, which was super sweet. And now it's like something he loves. Now it's something he like loves doing. And he's like, do you need to put lotion? He's like, do you need a rub down? And I'm like, yes, I do. But it's like, there's something like I've noticed with several people where it's like, you don't know what being ashy is? I'm like, white people are ashy too. Like, you just don't see it. Like, why do you think they say black don't crack? Like, that's because we fucking moisturize.
Yes.
Yeah. And the only thing he could relate to was a Bill Burr stand-up where he did this whole skit on how he had dated this Black girl and how he learned all about lotion and that about ashiness. And it's really a great skit. It's really funny. I highly suggest looking it up. It's on Netflix. But yeah, he was like, that was like his only notion of what ashy was that Bill Burr had talked about dating this Black girl and learning about lotion. And so part of me, I'm like, I have to question this, and I'm like, is this a good thing that I'm educating white men on what ashy is, or should I be dating someone that knows what ashy is?
Well, but they won't know if someone doesn't educate them. And
exactly.
I mean, honestly, like, God bless you, because I don't have the patience to educate people on what stuff like that is, but people don't learn unless they're told. If that's not their experience, they have to be told. And so I think that it's good that you're educating them on these things so that they know.
Also, I'm like, you live in Canada where it's fucking freezing. You mean to tell me you've never dated a girl that was like, I got to put lotion on because it's cold as shit outside? And your skin's drying out? Like,
so many questions.
What? I was very confused. It's one of my favorite stories that I like love to give him shit for. That's kind of bad, but like he's not the only one, and that's where the education of ashiness is very important.
Oh yeah, so many questions about skin, hair. It goes on, and it is, if you are in that position, you do get put in a position where you are kind of educating.
Yes,
and there's nothing wrong with that, but that is it's like if you get into an interracial relationship, understand that is part of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I mean, he's teaching me about being Canadian.
Yeah, so it's a two-way street.
Yeah, like we're educating each other.
You're both
on
learning
these life experiences. But
I think yours are a little more functional skills that you're sharing.
Yes. No, and now honestly, he's like, "Can you put coconut oil on me?"
Yeah. See, his skin is going to be so much better.
Absolutely,
moisturize people.
Absolutely, it's super important.
So
super important.
Okay, switching gears a little bit. Mm-hmm. This is going to be a weird question, but I get it all the time. I'm terrible at answering it because I'm boring and I do nothing. Mm-hmm. I feel like you'll have better answers.
Okay.
So, as a fellow Seattleite, what are some of your like Seattle favorites? If someone's visiting Seattle, what do they got to check out? Where do they got to go? Because people ask me for recommendations all the time. And I'm like, y'all, the reason why you see so much food on my Instagram is because I cook at home because I'm frugal. Like, I don't know where to tell you to go. So Seattle recommendations.
See, like I'm frugal too, and I feel you on that. Like I try to go to the market, and I have like a CSA, and I try to cook at home as much as I can. But I also like to treat myself sometimes.
Treat yourself
to like some good food. Like I'm very particular. Yeah. If you like farm to table, if you like vegetarian options, I have a few spots for you. Local 360 on First Ave is one of my absolute favorites. Literally everything is sourced from 360-degree mile radius of Seattle. So super local, even like their liqueurs and stuff. The desserts there are delicious. They do have like a lot of like seafood and options and whatnot, but they definitely have like some good plant-based options on there.
Yeah.
I also love going to Terra Plata, which is in Capitol Hill. They have like a cute little rooftop and like a little bit pricier plates, but a lot of like plant-based, like locally sourced, listing the farms, that kind of thing. Also, this is like an absolute must. Like I literally tell people, if you come to Seattle, you cannot not go to this spot. But like you have to be an awesome normal person who likes chocolate.
Oh yeah.
Hot Cakes is not a pancake shop. Every time I say that, people are like, oh, like pancakes? I'm like, no, stop talking. Hot Cakes is not something to mess around with, guys. Hot Cakes is an amazing dessert place. Please tell me you've been there.
I haven't.
Oh my God.
I need to check it out though. I know what you're talking about.
Okay.
Like I've heard of it.
I don't have like a tour guide of Seattle, but maybe I should like tour guide you and then like you can make a guide of Seattle.
There we go. Yes.
Because I feel like I need to like help you experience Seattle. And you've lived here longer than I have. So Hot Cakes, it's like chocolate molten lava cakes. They're like single serve and they come with like ice cream. They do like boozy shakes, which like I don't drink, but I always say that as like an exciting thing because I think people like it. Yeah. They do this amazing chocolate chip cookie with like ice cream on top and caramel and like just all the fun stuff. And they do like vegan shakes and they do like s'mores hot chocolate. They have this smoked hot chocolate. It's so amazing. I have some take and bakes here in my freezer, so we could have one for dessert tonight if you'd like.
Here for it.
They are open like late on weekends. Their Instagram is Get Your Hot Cakes and it's beautiful. It's honestly beautiful. And they like do such a good job of like collaborating with other locals, just like vendors and stuff. Like they're amazing. I'm so disappointed in you. You've not gone to Hot Cakes.
I'm the worst at like doing things.
We're going to fix this.
I'm on board with this. Molten chocolate cake. I'm with it.
Yes. And the last thing I'll say, food wise, is like if you are ever here on a Sunday, 100% go to the Ballard Farmers Market on Sundays. It's open year round. It is my absolute favorite. Like literally every Sunday I go, I pick up my CSA at Collins Family Orchard, which is like apples and pears in the summer. It's like peaches, nectarines, cherries, all the good stuff. The ramen stand is amazing. I like had never even had ramen and I went and had their ramen and then I had other ramens and I was like, these other ramen suck. I was like, this first ramen, I was spoiled. They're called Brothers and Co. and they are amazing. And the Salmon Berry Goods have these delicious pastries, peanut butter malt cookie. Oh, so good. They're just wonderful.
That sounds amazing.
All the vendors at the market.
Yeah, I do love that market.
It's
the
amazing.
best one.
Yeah. I love it. It's perfect. Check out the plant shop. Like, just explore Ballard. Have a fun time. Go to Golden Gardens. You can watch the Olympic Mountains at sunset. You can go to Cary Park and Queen Anne's to see the sunset of the city with Mount Rainier. There's all kinds of wonderful spots.
So many good recommendations. We'll have all of those linked in the show notes.
Yes.
And if you slide into my DMs and ask me for Seattle recommendations, please don't be offended if I copy and paste what she just said and message it back to you.
We'll go one day and do like a tour of Seattle and like I'll show you some
and
good.
Then I'll have some recs.
Yeah. Have you had like Pagliacci pizza?
Yeah. I've had Pagliacci.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I know. I don't know what my deal is. I'm like, what do I do all day? I don't know.
Yeah. Like, I'm so disappointed in the hotcakes thing. Like,
I know. I've heard of it and I've like seen it. It looks amazing. I don't know why I haven't had one yet.
I mean, I'm just like, I'm a big dessert person.
Yeah.
Like, I literally finish every meal with some kind of a dessert, like portion controlled. Like, it's like one square of dark chocolate.
Yeah.
But hotcakes is just a game fucking changer. And I'm like, I go to other cities and I'm like, y'all don't got no hotcakes? I'm like, you don't got no good dessert options? Like, what do you do here? Like, how do you live here?
What's the point?
Yeah, it's like honestly really disappointing to me. Hotcakes like sets the standard so high.
So that's numero uno on the recommendation list. I think that talking about hotcakes, also how you were saying like portion controlling the desserts leads us into our last question perfectly. Yeah. What does being a balanced Black girl mean to you?
Oh boy. I think I'm like still figuring that out. Yeah. I think like feeling grounded in myself makes me feel like I'm like a balanced Black girl. Like honestly, for me, which might be a little different, feeling balanced as a Black girl is like an interesting question because there's like, it's like half of me, you know?
Yeah.
So it's like, I feel balanced as a Black girl when I allow myself the space, the judgment-free space to just be me.
Yeah.
Like to not put myself in the box or put the mask on of being like whitewashed and comfortable for white people.
Yeah.
And not feeling like being around white people, they're going to say that I'm acting Black or whatever because they're just used to just me just being me at that point. And that's just me. It's not necessarily that I'm Black. It's not necessarily that I'm white, but it's like I'm just overall balanced in who I am. And I'm showing up fully authentically in those interactions and not being like, I don't know. I don't even know how to imitate like my white prissy voice. My other like Black girlfriends do a very good job of it. But I think, just allowing myself to like be grounded and feeling like that judgment-free space is so important for me to like feel balanced as like the Black girl part of me. Like judgment-free space to just be you.
Yeah. Oh, I love that.
Yeah. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I think that's the perfect note to end it on.
Yeah.
So Taylor, where can our audience find you if they want to follow you, if they want to listen to your podcast? Where can they find you?
Yes. People can listen to my podcast on iTunes, on Spotify, Google Play, any like major platform for podcasting. It's called Let's Talk About It with Taylor and Nolan. And you can follow me on Instagram at Taymocha. That's Taymocha. And I would just like to note, I'm Taymocha not because I'm brown, which most people think is the case. They're like, oh, Taymocha, because you're brown. And I'm like, no. My first cat, her name was Mocha Joe, and she was like my sister growing up. And so I just like combined our names together when I was really young. It was my first email, and I was just like all my social
just stuck
media.
With it.
Yeah, I'm just like,
Taymocha.
that feels like authentically me.
Yeah.
I'm just a crazy cat lady.
I love it.
So
Contribute to your cat.
Taymocha, that's me.
I love it. Well, thank you so much for being on the show today, Taylor.
Yeah,
it's so much fun talking to you.
Me too.
Thank you guys so much for tuning in to this episode. And I really hope that, you guys have taken away a lot of things from this episode with Les. Definitely check out her podcast called Balanced Black Girl. And let's keep having these conversations. It was very interesting for me to, be open and to just kind of have an honest conversation around the different experiences that people of color can have, because they're just very, very different experiences. And would love to hear from you guys as to, how you enjoyed this kind of episode being a little bit different of sharing, where I'm being interviewed in an episode. So let me know your thoughts. You can send me an email at ask.letstalkaboutit@gmail.com. And as always, love reading your reviews on iTunes. That support really, really helps with the show. And again, just appreciate all of your guys' support. This was a very vulnerable episode for me to share. So I hope that you guys enjoyed it. And thanks for talking with me. And I'll be back next week with another episode. So take care, you guys. I'll talk to you next time.
podcast is brought to you by Wave Podcast Network. Check out all of our shows, including the Brain Candy Podcast, I Don't Get It, Babes and Babies, Coffee Convos, and Let's Talk About It.